He had the world at his feet, but only she, his first love with a mop in hand, could make him whole
Why are you
again.
mopping floor?
Hello, bestie. Welcome. Please stay with me as I
I have no
unfold this
choice, sir.
interesting romantic story. If you enjoy the story, please support us by subscribing to this channel and hit the notification button for more. Thank you. Grab your popcorn, sit back, relax, and enjoy this story. The ballroom of the Eco Convention Center glittered with golden chandeliers and champagne laughter. Politicians mingled with billionaires, business tycoons boasted about their latest acquisitions, and camera flashes followed Kenneth Obina wherever he moved. At only 38, he had built an empire in oil, real estate, and banking. His name was synonymous with power, his face splashed across business magazines every month. Yet, amid the clinking of glasses and the endless congratulations, Kenneth felt nothing. He smiled politely at investors, shook hands with ministers, but inside, a hollow ache gnawed at him. "Mr. Obina, congratulations on the new Pendhouse project," a foreign diplomat said, patting his shoulder. "Thank you," Kenneth replied with practiced charm, though his mind was far away. He often wondered how life might have turned out if he had taken a different path, one not paved with endless contracts and merciless ambition. Somewhere deep within, he carried a memory, a face that refused to fade. Kayamika. She had been his first love back at the University of Ibadan, when life was simpler and dreams were still fragile. They had shared roasted corn under mango trees, scribbled plans in tattered notebooks, and promised each other forever. But forever had slipped through their fingers. Kenneth left for business abroad, chasing opportunities, while Kayamika disappeared from his life without goodbye. He searched once, but with time, the ache dulled into silence. Still, every now and then, at night, in moments like this gala, it returned sharp and undeniable. His friend, Chief Adeyemi, broke his thoughts. "Ken, why so quiet tonight? Another billion-dollar deal on your mind?" Kenneth chuckled softly. Something like that. But it wasn't business he was thinking about. It was a girl with bright eyes and laughter that once made the world seem lighter. He sighed, straightened his tuxedo, and prepared himself for another meaningless night among the elite. Little did he know destiny had plans. Plans that would soon bring back the very woman who owned the part of him no empire could ever replace. The night after the gala, Kenneth returned to his pride and joy, the newly completed penthouse office mansion perched high above Victoria Island. It was late, the city lights glittering below like scattered diamonds, and most of his staff had already gone home. He entered quietly, his polished shoes echoing against the marble floors. The penthouse was usually silent at that hour, but tonight, the faint squeak of a mop and the soft shuffle of footsteps broke the stillness. Kenneth frowned. He had given instructions that cleaning should be done during the day, never when he was around. With a slow, deliberate pace, he walked toward the sound. And then he froze. There, bent over the shimmering floor, was a woman in a faded blue cleaner's uniform, her hands moving rhythmically as she mopped. A scarf loosely tied around her head couldn't hide the familiar curve of her cheekbones, the delicate grace of her movements. Kenneth's breath caught in his throat. His heart slammed against his chest, harder than it had in years. "Amaka?" he whispered, almost to himself. The woman straightened abruptly, startled by the sound of his voice. The mop slipped from her hand, clattering against the marble. Her wide eyes met his, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed to stop. "Kenneth," she said softly, disbelief lacing her tone. Her voice. It was the same voice that once laughed under the Ibadan sun, the same voice that whispered promises in crowded lecture halls. He took a step forward, but she quickly looked away, fumbling with the mop. "Sir, I'm sorry. I didn't know anyone was here. They'll finish quickly and leave." But Kenneth couldn't move. He couldn't speak. He was staring at the woman who had haunted his dreams for nearly 2 decades, and she was standing in his penthouse, mopping floors like a stranger. "Amaka," he said again, firmer this time, almost as if he was afraid she would vanish if he blinked. "It's you." Her hands trembled as she gripped the mop. "Please, I need this job. Don't report me." His chest tightened. "Report her?" He wanted to shake the universe for bringing her back this way. A cleaner? In his penthouse? No, this was not the Amaka he remembered. This was life's cruelty playing tricks. I could never report you, Kenneth said softly, his voice thick. Do you know how long I've searched for you? She flinched at his words, her eyes glistening. But before he could say more, she picked up her mop and hurried toward the corner of the hall, hiding behind duty, hiding behind shame. Kenneth stood frozen, torn between disbelief and a rush of emotions too strong to contain. He had built empires, commanded nations' attention, but in that moment, he was simply a man standing before the ghost of his first love, alive and breathing, yet so impossibly far from the world he lived in now. And deep within, he knew one thing. Fate had just rewritten the script of his life. The next morning, Kenneth sat in his office, staring at the skyline of Lagos, but his mind wasn't on the numbers flashing across his tablet screen. He had barely slept. Each time he closed his eyes, the image returned. Kayamika, bent over with a mop, her eyes wide with shock, her voice trembling with old familiarity. He rubbed his temples. How could life reduce her to this? A knock came at the door. His personal assistant, Adiz, peeked in. Sir, the board is waiting for the quarterly review. Kenneth waved her off. Reschedule it. I have something more important to attend to. Adiz blinked, surprised. Nothing was ever more important than the board to Kenneth Obinna. But she simply nodded and left. Kenneth stood, straightened his suit, and made his way down the hall where the cleaning staff usually worked during off hours. His heart thumped with each step. He wasn't sure what he would say, but he knew he couldn't let last night be the end. At the far end of the corridor, he saw her again. Kayamika was on her knees, scrubbing the edge of the marble with a bucket by her side. She looked smaller than he remembered, thinner, her uniform too loose for her frame. But her face, oh, her face, was the same one etched into his memory for 17 long years. He cleared his throat gently. Amaka! Her hands stilled. Slowly, she turned, her eyes meeting his. This time, she didn't look away. You remembered my name, she said quietly. Kenneth's lips curved in a bittersweet smile. How could I forget? You were my whole world once. Her breath caught. She shook her head, standing quickly as if to put distance between them. That was a long time ago, Kenneth. Please, don't say things like that. Why not? He stepped closer, his voice low but steady. I searched for you. After school, you just disappeared. I thought maybe you left the country or worse. I didn't disappear, she said, hugging her arms around herself. Life happened. My mother fell ill. I had to drop out, take care of her. There was no time for dreams, no room for us. Kenneth's chest tightened. And you couldn't tell me? Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. You were already chasing your future. I didn't want to hold you back. Silence hung between them, heavy and raw. Kenneth swallowed hard, fighting to keep his composure. Amaka, do you know how many nights I lay awake, wondering where you were? Why you left without goodbye? Her lips trembled. She turned away, picking up the bucket as if clinging to her new reality. It doesn't matter anymore. You're a billionaire now, and I clean your floors. That's all there is to it. He reached out, gently touching her wrist. The contact made her gasp, and for the first time, she allowed herself to look into his eyes. No, Kenneth said softly, firmly. That's not all there is. Not for me. In that moment, the years melted away. They were no longer billionaire and janitor, but two young souls standing under a mango tree again, whispering promises that fate had once stolen. And Kenneth knew this was only the beginning. The staff lounge was small, tucked away at the back of the penthouse mansion. Kenneth had insisted they sit there after she tried to escape his questions a second time. Kayamika perched on the edge of a plastic chair, clutching her cleaning rag in her lap like a shield, while Kenneth sat opposite her, too restless to remain still. Amaka, he said gently, I need to understand. How did we end up here? You and me? She hesitated, her eyes flickering to the door as though hoping for an interruption. None came. At last, she exhaled and lowered her gaze. You remember my mother? She began softly. Kenneth nodded. He remembered a kind woman who always welcomed him with bowls of steaming yam porridge in their small Abaddon flat. She fell sick not long after you left for London, Kayamika continued. It started with headaches, then weakness, then hospital visits we couldn't afford. The bills piled up. I had to leave school to care for her. Her voice cracked, but she pressed on. I tried to work, selling akara by the roadside, washing clothes for neighbors, anything. But it wasn't enough. Some days we had nothing to eat. I thought about reaching out to you, but, Kenneth, you were already becoming someone. You had that scholarship abroad, you had dreams I didn't want to ruin. So I made a choice. Kenneth's hands tightened into fists on his knees. You call leaving me without a word a choice? Tears slipped down her cheeks, though she quickly wiped them with the back of her hand. If I had told you, you would have stayed. And I couldn't let you. You deserved more than a girl tied down by sickness and poverty. I thought, if I let you go, maybe at least one of us would make it. For a moment, Kenneth could only stare at her, his throat burning with emotions he couldn't name. He remembered those long nights in London when loneliness ate at him, when he had searched her name on old classmate lists, when he had wondered if she had simply stopped loving him. All these years, he whispered, I thought you didn't want me anymore. Her lips trembled. I never stopped wanting you, but wanting doesn't pay hospital bills. The silence that followed was heavy, filled only by the hum of the ceiling fan. Kenneth leaned forward, his voice rough. So you carried all that alone? You chose to suffer alone rather than let me be part of it? Kayamika's shoulders sagged, and for the first time, her strength seemed to falter. I did what I thought was right. My mother, she died 2 years later. After that, I tried to rebuild, but life has been unkind. This job, she gestured to her faded uniform, is the only thing keeping me afloat now. Kenneth felt something break inside him. He had conquered the world, but he had failed the one person he once vowed to protect. Slowly, he reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. You should never have carried that burden alone, Amaka. Never. She looked at him then, really looked, and for a heartbeat, the pain of the years was softened by the warmth in his eyes. But just as quickly, she pulled her hand away, retreating into herself. You're not the same boy I knew, she said quietly. And am not the same girl. Whatever we had, it belongs to the past. But Kenneth wasn't convinced. As he left the lounge that night, one thing burned in his chest. He would not let her slip away again. Not this time. Over the next few days, Kenneth found himself altering his routine, something he never did. Meetings were shifted, evening appointments rescheduled. His staff whispered about their boss' strange new habits, but no one dared question him. The truth was simple. Kenneth wanted to see her. Each evening, when most of the building was deserted, he would linger in his office, waiting for the sound of her mop swishing across the marble. And when it came, his heart would quicken like a young man's again. At first, Kayamika avoided him. She kept her head down, her steps brisk, pretending not to notice when he appeared near the hallways or by the lounge. But Kenneth was patient. One night, he approached her with a cup in his hand. You still take your tea with milk and 2 spoons of sugar? He asked softly. Chiamaka frose. Her eyes darted to the steaming cup, then back to him. You remember that? I remember everything, he replied. Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she accepted the tea. They stood in silence as she sipped, the tension between them heavy yet strangely comforting. Another evening, he found her wiping down the glass windows overlooking the city. Do you still sing when you work? He asked. Her head snapped toward him. What? In school, you always hummed when you studied. I used to sit beside you just to listen. You never knew, did you? A reluctant smile tugged at her lips before she quickly hid it. That was a long time ago, Kenneth. But she hummed later that night, softly, unconsciously, and Kenneth's heart swelled. Bit by bit, the ice began to thaw. He asked about her mother, about the little corner shop she once dreamed of opening. She asked about his travels, his businesses, the world he now ruled. Their conversations were brief, sometimes no more than a few minutes before she retreated again. But each word carried the weight of 17 lost years. One evening, as she packed her bucket and mop, Kenneth leaned against the wall, watching her. You know, Amaka, for all my wealth, I don't think I've felt this alive in years. Just standing here talking to you. She froze, her back to him, her shoulders stiff. Don't say things like that. Why not? It's the truth. Slowly, she turned, her eyes shimmering. Because the truth is dangerous, Kenneth. And I can't afford to believe in dangerous things anymore. He stepped closer, his voice firm. Then let me carry that danger. Just don't shut me out. For a long moment, she held his gaze, the battle between fear and longing clear in her eyes. Finally, she whispered, "Good night," and walked away. Kenneth watched her disappear into the elevator, his heart pounding. He knew she was slipping further into his world again, no matter how much she tried to resist. And for the first time in years, Kenneth Obinna felt hope. The rain poured heavily that Friday evening, drumming against the glass walls of the penthouse like 1,000 restless fingers. Kayamika was on duty, wringing out her mop by the hall when Kenneth appeared. His suit jacket slung carelessly over his shoulder, tie loosened. Amaka, he called softly. She stiffened, but didn't turn. "Sir, it's late. You should go home." "Home?" He gave a short laugh. "This place is just another mansion with walls. It doesn't feel like home." Her hands tightened on the mop. She didn't want to ask, but the question slipped out anyway. "Then what does?" Kenneth stepped closer, his eyes never leaving her. "Once upon a time, home was wherever you were." Her breath caught. She turned sharply, glaring at him, though her eyes glistened with unshed tears. Don't say that. You're a billionaire now, Kenneth. Your world is boardrooms, jets, and headlines. My world is mops, buckets, and rent I can barely pay. Don't confuse pity with love." His jaw clenched. "Is that what you think this is? Pity?" She swallowed hard, forcing herself to hold his gaze. What else could it be? For a moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the storm outside. Then Kenneth reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn item. He held it out to her. Her eyes widened. It was a folded piece of paper, edges yellowed with age. Slowly, she opened it, her hands trembling. Her heart stopped. It was the letter she had written him back in university, the last one before she disappeared. She had slipped it under his hostel door, confessing her love and her fear of the future. She thought he had never seen it. "I kept it," Kenneth said quietly. "All these years. Do you still think I could pity the woman who wrote this?" Tears spilled down her cheeks, unstoppable now. She shook her head, struggling to form words. "Kenneth, I can't let myself fall again. It will break me." He stepped forward, so close that the warmth of his presence surrounded her. "Then let me fall for both of us. I'm not leaving this time, Amaka. Not for business. Not for the world. Not for anything." Her chest rose and fell in ragged breaths. The storm outside raged on, mirroring the storm within her. And then, without meaning to, without wanting to, she whispered the words she had buried for years. "I never stopped loving you." The admission hung in the air, fragile yet powerful. Kenneth's hand brushed her cheek, his thumb wiping away a tear. For the first time in 17 years, their hearts beat in unison again. But just as quickly, Kayamika stepped back, clutching her ragged uniform like armor. "This doesn't change reality. The world won't let you love me. And I don't have the strength to be mocked again." She hurried away before he could reply, leaving Kenneth standing in the echo of her confession, his chest burning with equal parts victory and anguish. He knew now, she still loved him, and that was enough to fight the whole world if he had to. The weekend passed in uneasy silence. Kayamika tried to convince herself that what happened on Friday, the tears, the confession, the touch of his hand, was nothing more than a slip of weakness. She buried herself in her work, moving through the penthouse with her head bowed, avoiding Kenneth's searching gaze whenever he appeared. But fate had other plans. On Monday morning, Kenneth's phone buzzed incessantly as he entered his office. Headlines flashed across every major gossip blog and tabloid in Lagos. Billionaire Kenneth Obinna spotted with cleaning lady in Pendhouse. From university love to janitor, billionaire's secret past exposed? Empire in trouble? Obinna seen sharing intimate moments with staff. Kenneth frowned as he scrolled through the photos. Grainy images taken through the glass walls of the penthouse. One captured him handing Kayamika a cup of tea. Another showed them standing close by the window, his hand brushing her arm. To outsiders, it was scandalous. To Kenneth, it was sacred, and he felt fury rise at the intrusion. His intercom buzzed. Adiz, his personal assistant, spoke in a low, urgent tone. "Sir, the board is demanding a meeting. They say the tabloids are bad for the company's image." Kenneth pinched the bridge of his nose. "Let them wait." Downstairs, Kayamika had no idea what storm had erupted above her. That was, until her fellow cleaner, Ifeoma, rushed toward her, holding a phone. "Chia, look, it's you. You and Oga Kenneth. You're everywhere." Kayamika's eyes widened as she saw the photos. Her blood ran cold. Whispers from the other staff followed, pitying and mocking all at once. "Imagine our sister and the big man. She better enjoy before they throw her out. Rich men don't marry cleaners. She's only a plaything." The words cut deep, reopening wounds she had fought to hide. Her hands shook so badly she dropped the bucket she was holding, water spilling across the tiles. By the time Kenneth found her that evening, she was sitting alone in the janitor's closet, hugging her knees. Her eyes were red, her uniform damp from the spill she hadn't bothered to clean. "Amaka," he said softly, crouching beside her. She flinched. "You have to stop this, Kenneth. Look what they're saying. They're laughing at me, at us." He reached for her hand, but she pulled it back. "I can't survive this kind of shame again. I want." Kenneth's gaze hardened, though his voice was calm. "Let them laugh. Let them talk. They don't know you. They don't know us." Her eyes brimmed with fresh tears. "But the world listens to them, Kenneth. And the world doesn't forgive women like me. Tomorrow it will be worse. They'll dig into my past, mock every scar I carry. And you, your empire, your name, all of it will suffer." Kenneth cupped her face gently, forcing her to look at him. "Then let them suffer, because I will not lose you again. Not to poverty, not to sickness, and certainly not to tabloids." For the first time, Kayamika saw the storm in his eyes, the same man who once fought his way from a one-room student hostel to global boardrooms. He was not bluffing, but she also knew the world could be merciless. And as she leaned against his chest, trembling, she couldn't shake the feeling that their love had just been thrown into a battlefield neither of them was prepared for. By Monday morning, Lagos woke up to headlines that burned hotter than the Harmattan sun. Billionaire Obinna spotted with mystery cleaner girl. From mop to mansion? Who is the woman beside Kenneth? Love or lust? Billionaire romance with lowly janitor rocks high society. Kenneth's driver placed the newspapers on his desk as usual, but for the first time in years, Kenneth didn't just skim the business section. He read every venomous line. The tabloids had dug up Kayamika's identity, plastered her old staff ID photo beside his glossy magazine portraits, and turned her life into a public scandal overnight. By the time Kenneth arrived at his Victoria Island office, his phone was buzzing with calls. Shareholders were furious, business partners unsettled, and socialites mocking. "Ken, what nonsense am I reading?" Chief Adeyemi barked over the phone. "A cleaner? In your penthouse? In your arms? Do you know what this does to your reputation?" Kenneth leaned back in his leather chair, his jaw tight. "Adeyemi, my reputation is mine to shape, and if the world doesn't like it, they can choke on their words." Adeyemi muttered, "This isn't about love, it's about business. No one will respect you if you drag a woman from the mop bucket into your empire." Kenneth ended the call without answering. But the storm had only begun. At Kayamika's hostel in Surulere, her landlord waved the paper at her. "Ah, Madam Cleaner, so you want to disgrace us? See as your face day everywhere." Neighbors whispered, children pointed. and colleagues at the cleaning company avoided her like she carried a plague. When Kenneth arrived that evening with his convoy, the gossip turned into open hostility. Some women hissed, "She won't use our billionaire climb ladder," while men sneered, "Not wettin' you gain from mopping floor." Kayamika sat on the edge of her bed, clutching the paper, her hands trembling. Tears welled up. She had worked hard to build a quiet, honest life. Now the world was shredding her dignity. Kenneth entered, the tabloids still under his arm. He knelt before her, ignoring the shocked stares of the hostile residents gathered at the doorway. "Kayamika," he said softly, lifting her chin. "Look at me." She hesitated, but their eyes met. "I won't let them destroy you. I won't let them shame what we have. I fought for empires, for contracts, for power, but now I will fight for you. Against every voice, against every headline." Her lips trembled. "Ken, this scandal can ruin you." "Then let it ruin me," he whispered, "because I'd rather be ruined with you than live perfect without you." Outside, the tabloids roared louder, but inside that small room, a vow was sealed. Kenneth had declared war, not just against the media, but against an entire society that believed love had no place between a billionaire and a woman with a mop. Kayamika had always carried her dignity quietly, like a candle in the dark. But in the weeks since the tabloids splashed her name across their front pages, that candle was flickering. Every whisper, every mocking stare, every hiss of cleaner girl billionaire's toy sliced at her pride. By the time she returned to the Obina mansion one Friday morning, mop in hand, she could hardly lift her head. Staff members who once greeted her with warmth now giggled behind her back. One of the maids smirked. "From mop to mansion, a BI? Madam Billionaire in waiting." Kayamika's throat tightened. She set her mop down, her chest heaving. For years, she had worked hard, cleaned floors without complaint, swallowed humiliation to survive. But now, every second on these shiny marble floors felt like a cruel stage where she was both servant and spectacle. That afternoon, she made her decision. She folded her uniform carefully, placed it in a small bag, and walked toward the exit gates of the mansion. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered to herself. Not like this. But Kenneth had returned early from a meeting and spotted her walking away, her bag slung over her shoulder, her steps heavy with defeat. He hurried after her, his voice breaking the calm of the courtyard. "Kayamika!" She froze but didn't turn. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her bag. Kenneth caught up, stepping in front of her. "Where are you going?" Her eyes glistened as she finally faced him. "Home. Away. Anywhere but here, Ken. I can't stand being mocked anymore. I can't stand being the woman everyone points at, whispers about. They don't see me, they only see the mop." Her voice cracked on the last word, and tears spilled down her cheeks. For a long moment, Kenneth just looked at her. Then he took a step back, his voice rising, not in anger, but in something fierce and unshakable. Staff members stopped what they were doing. Guards straightened. Gardeners looked up from their trimming. "You are not beneath me," Kenneth declared, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "Do you hear me, Kayamika? You are not beneath me, you are my equal." The words echoed, bold and defiant. The onlookers gasped, some exchanging stunned glances. Kenneth stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You are not the mop. You are not their whispers. You are the woman I love. The woman who stood by me when I had nothing. If I could build empires from dust, I will build a kingdom just to honor you." Kayamika's tears flowed freely now. She tried to protest. But, "Ken, the world. Let the world talk." Kenneth cut in, his hand firm on hers. "Let the tabloids print their poison. I will never be ashamed of you. And if it takes shouting it from every rooftop in Lagos, I will." The courtyard was silent. Even the mocking maids who once laughed at her lowered their eyes in shame. For the first time in weeks, Kayamika's shoulders eased. Kenneth hadn't just defended her, he had elevated her in front of those who saw her as less. And in that moment, she realized something powerful. She wasn't walking out of his life. She was stepping into a love that refused to let her be small. If the tabloids thought Kenneth Obina would retreat in shame, they were mistaken. Instead of hiding Kayamika in the shadows, he brought her into the light. Every day, his gestures grew louder, bolder, impossible for Lagos to ignore. One morning, Kayamika opened her window in Surulere to find a florist van outside. A dozen men were unloading baskets of fresh roses, red, white, and yellow, enough to fill her tiny room. Neighbors gathered, wide-eyed, as Kenneth himself appeared, sleeves rolled, carrying the last bouquet. "Good morning," he said with a boyish grin. "I hear flowers make scorn easier to bear." The crowd gasped, phones flashing. By noon, the photos were everywhere. Kenneth Obina drowns cleaner in flowers. Romance or rebellion? Billionaire's bold gesture stuns city. If flowers were not enough, dinners followed. Not in hidden corners of private clubs, but in the open Ikoyi, Victoria Island, even the Marina waterfront. Kenneth would pull out her chair, hold her hand across the table, and laugh with her as though the world's eyes didn't burn holes in their skin. At first, Kayamika was overwhelmed. She wasn't used to velvet gowns and candlelit dinners. She stumbled over forks at fine restaurants, unsure which one to use. But Kenneth only teased gently, leaning close to whisper, "Eat however you want. You're the most elegant woman in this room." Their romance became the city's spectacle. Socialites hissed over champagne glasses. "He's embarrassing us all." Critics sneered on radio talk shows. "A cleaner cannot dine with a king." Yet, no matter the backlash, Kenneth pressed forward. He sent her handwritten letters instead of emails. He danced with her at an open-air concert, spinning her until she laughed so loud even the band paused to smile. He knelt in the rain outside her hostel one stormy evening just to prove a point. "You are my heart," he told her, soaked to the bone. "And I'll let the whole of Lagos drown with me if that's what it takes to show you." By now, the headlines had changed tone. Billionaire in love. Kenneth refuses to hide his janitor. Love story or madness? Obina's relentless pursuit of Kayamika. The city watched, half in disbelief, half in envy, as a billionaire chased a woman the world called unworthy. But Kayamika, standing in the center of this whirlwind, felt a new truth dawning in her heart. Kenneth wasn't ashamed. Kenneth wasn't wavering. He wasn't just wooing her. He was rewriting the rules of love in front of the entire nation. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, Kayamika began to believe she deserved it. The roses had faded. The candlelit dinners were only memories now. What remained were the flashing cameras, the endless gossip columns, and the stares that followed Kayamika everywhere she went. She sat alone one night in Kenneth's penthouse, wrapped in one of his oversized shirts, staring at the glittering Lagos skyline. The city looked like 1,000 jewels scattered across black velvet, beautiful, unreachable, and cold. Her phone buzzed with yet another notification. A gossip blog headline blared, "Obina's charity case. Can she survive in high society?" Kayamika sighed and turned the phone face down. The laughter from that afternoon still echoed in her ears. 3 socialite women at a boutique Kenneth had taken her to. Their perfume hung in the air as they whispered just loud enough for her to hear. "See her struggling with designer heels. She looks like a maid playing dress-up. Money can buy clothes, but it can't buy class." Kayamika had pretended not to hear, but each word lodged like a thorn in her chest. Now, as she sat in the silence of Kenneth's luxurious world, doubt pressed on her heart like a weight. Did she really belong here? Could a girl who once scrubbed these very floors ever stand proudly beside him under the spotlight of high society? The thought of a lifetime of mockery terrified her. What if she became nothing more than a cruel joke? What if every gala, every board dinner, every public outing was another stage for her humiliation? Kenneth found her there, lost in thought. He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her shoulders, his chin resting on her head. "You're quiet," he murmured. She hesitated, then whispered, "Ken, what if I don't belong here?" He pulled back just enough to see her face, his brow furrowing. "What do you mean?" Her eyes glistened. "Look at me, Ken. I was a janitor. Your world is cameras, champagne, power. My world was mops and rent I couldn't pay. Every time I walk into a room with you, I feel like I'm being measured and laughed at. For the first time, Kenneth didn't answer right away. His silence scared her more than the tabloids. Maybe, she said softly, looking away. Maybe I'm not strong enough for this. Maybe I don't fit into your world, no matter how much I love you. Kenneth gently took her chin, turning her back to him. His voice was steady, but there was an edge of pain in it. Kayamika, don't let their noise blind you. You're not in my world, you are my world. Without you, all this, he gestured at the penthouse, the glittering skyline, the empire beyond, means nothing. She searched his eyes, but her doubts lingered. Love was powerful, yes, but was it enough to silence a city's laughter? That night, when Kenneth fell asleep beside her, Kayamika lay awake, staring at the ceiling. For the first time, she wondered not if she loved him, but if she was built to endure the storm that came with loving him. The press conference had been scheduled for weeks, an ordinary briefing to announce Kenneth Obina's latest real estate venture. But the tension in the air that morning was anything but ordinary. By the time Kenneth stepped onto the stage, the hall was packed beyond capacity. Reporters jostled for space, their cameras already aimed at him, their pens poised like weapons. The entire nation had been waiting, whispering, speculating. Would Kenneth deny her? Would he bow to pressure, end the scandal, and save his empire? Kenneth adjusted just his tie, cleared his throat, and began with the expected lines. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. Today, I want to address not just business, but something far more important. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. This was not on the agenda. Kenneth set down his notes. He didn't need them. His eyes scanned the sea of flashing cameras, then softened as they found Kayamika, sitting quietly in the front row, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I have heard the whispers, Kenneth said, his voice steady. I have read the headlines, and I know what you call her. Cleaner, maid, janitor. He let the words hang in the air. But let me tell you who she really is. She is the woman who loved me before you knew my name. She is the first person who believed in me when I had nothing. And she is the only woman I will ever love. Gasps echoed across the room. Reporters leaned forward, scribbling furiously, cameras snapping like gunfire. Kenneth's voice grew firmer, louder. Mock me all you want. Drag my reputation through the mud. Question my business, my empire, my sanity. Do your worst, but do not mock her, because she is not beneath me. She is my equal, my first and only love. The room fell silent, stunned. Kayamika's eyes widened, tears brimming. For weeks she had felt small, humiliated, crushed beneath society's gaze. But in that moment, as the man she loved tore off the armor of power and bared his heart before the nation, she felt something new, dignity. One bold reporter raised a trembling hand. Sir, are you saying you will marry her? Kenneth didn't hesitate. He looked straight into the cameras. Yes, I will marry her. The hall erupted. Some clapped, others gasped, a few sneered. By evening, the declaration was everywhere. Kenneth Obina defies nation. Vows to marry his janitor love. Billionaire Romeo. Obina declares Cleaner his first and only love. Some tabloids sneered, calling it a stunt. But many more were silenced, their venomous laughter drowned by the sheer weight of Kenneth's public devotion. For the first time, the war of whispers slowed. But for Kenneth and Kayamika, this was only the beginning. If his press conference had shaken the tabloids, it had also stirred deeper enemies, the kind not silenced by words. The night was warm, the harmattan haze finally gone, leaving the sky clear and alive with stars. Kenneth's convoy had taken a different road this evening, not toward the bustling districts of Victoria Island or the glittering towers of Ikoyi, but inland toward Abadan. Kayamika sat quietly beside him in the car, confused but curious. Ken, where are we going? He only smiled, his hand gently covering hers. To a place where it all began. When the car rolled through the gates of the University of Abadan, Kayamika's breath caught. Memories washed over her. Endless corridors, crowded lecture halls, the mango tree under which they used to sit, sharing roasted corn and laughter as students with nothing but dreams. Kenneth led her by the hand, not toward the halls of power or grand buildings, but to the quiet, grassy field near the library, the very spot where they had once scribbled plans into tattered notebooks, dreaming of futures far bigger than themselves. The campus was still, save for the distant chirping of crickets and the glow of lanterns in the far dormitories. Above them, the stars shone bright, like diamonds scattered across heaven's black cloth. Kayamika's eyes softened. "I can't believe you brought me here." Kenneth's smile was wistful. "This is where I first fell in love with you, where we built castles in the air. Do you remember what you told me one night, right here?" She chuckled softly. "That no matter how high you rose, you should never forget the ground where you started." He nodded. "And I never did. Even when I lost you, Kayamika, I carried this place, and you in my heart." Before she could answer, Kenneth slowly lowered himself to one knee. From his pocket, he drew a small velvet box. Gasps caught in her throat, her hand flying to her mouth. "Kayamika," he said, his voice steady but rich with emotion. "I could buy jewels, build towers, command nations, but none of it means anything without you. You were my first love, and by God's grace, you will be my last. Will you marry me? Will you be my forever?" Tears welled in her eyes, spilling down her cheeks as the stars seemed to lean closer to listen. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, firmer, her voice breaking with joy. "Yes, Kenneth, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her trembling finger, then rose to pull her into his arms. She buried her face against his chest as laughter and tears mingled, her heart pounding with a mixture of disbelief and pure happiness. For a moment, it was as if the world had fallen away. No tabloids, no mocking voices, no pressure from family or society. Just the two of them, back where it all began, making a promise under the same stars that had once witnessed their youthful dreams. Kenneth kissed her forehead gently. "From this night on, no more running, no more doubting. You are mine, Kayamika, and I am yours." And with that, their love, once shattered by time and distance, was sealed again, this time, forever. The morning sun rose bright over Lagos, gilding the skyline in gold. From Ikoyi to Victoria Island, the city buzzed with one headline: Kenneth Obinna weds his janitor love. It was the event of the year. Politicians, tycoons, celebrities, and curious onlookers filled the grand cathedral, its marble pillars draped in white silk and roses. Outside, the streets overflowed with crowds, some cheering, some sneering, all eager to witness the union that had shaken Nigeria's high society. Kayamika stood before the mirror in a simple but elegant lace gown, her heart thundering. The dress wasn't dripping in diamonds or imported silk. It was modest, chosen by her, a reflection of who she was. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the veil. "Do I really belong here?" she whispered to herself. But when the church doors swung open and the organ thundered, all doubts melted away. Kenneth was at the altar, tall and regal in his white suit, his gaze fixed on her as though she were the only person in the world. Every step she took down the aisle was met with a flurry of whispers. Imagine she used to mop floors in his mansion. He could have had any woman in Lagos and he chose her? This is madness. But Kenneth never broke eye contact. His smile was steady, his hand waiting. By the time she reached him, the whispers faded into nothing. The priest began the ceremony, but it was Kenneth's actions that spoke louder than words. When it was time to give vows, he didn't simply repeat after the priest. He turned to Kayamika, his voice ringing across the cathedral. "Kayamika, you are not my shame, you are my pride. Today, I choose you in front of everyone who doubted us. I choose you against the tabloids, against the sneers, against the world itself. From the first day we dreamed under the stars in Ibadan, you were my forever. And now, before God and man, I make it official." Gasps rippled through the audience, but many eyes brimmed with unexpected tears. Even some of the harshest critics lowered their heads. When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, Kenneth kissed her with such certainty that the flashing cameras seemed to fade away. The reception was a storm of contrasts. Half the hall cheered, raising glasses to the boldest love story of the decade. The other half sat stiffly, their whispers sharp as knives. "She's out of place. This marriage won't last." But Kenneth silenced them all by holding Kayamika's hand high and declaring, "This woman is my wife, my equal, my forever." The cameras exploded with flashes, immortalizing the image of a billionaire standing tall beside the woman who had once been mocked for carrying a mop. That night, as they danced under a canopy of lights, Kayamika rested her head on his shoulder. "Ken," she whispered, "we did it, against them all." Kenneth kissed her hair and whispered back, "No, my love, we didn't just do it, we won." And for the first time, the whispers around them no longer mattered. The world had watched, the world had judged, but in the end, love had spoken louder. The weeks after the wedding were like stepping into a new world. The newspapers were still filled with photos of their kiss at the altar, their clasped hands under flashing lights, their smiles breaking through the whispers. Some tabloids ran bitter headlines, calling it a scandalous fairy tale. Others softened, describing it as a love story that defied Lagos high society. But inside their home, none of that mattered. Kenneth and Kayamika settled into a rhythm that was refreshingly ordinary. Breakfasts weren't served on golden platters but on the small balcony overlooking the garden, where they shared akara and pap, laughing as though they were back in their university days. At night, Kenneth would come home from endless board meetings, loosen his tie, and find peace in the simple sight of Kayamika waiting with a warm meal and warmer smile. One evening, as they walked through the halls of their mansion, once a lonely, silent fortress, Kenneth stopped by the framed photograph of himself at an award gala. His eyes lingered on the glossy image of his past life, the wealth, the trophies, the empty applause. "Do you know something, Amaka?" he said softly, pulling her close. "I used to think all this was gold, but none of it gave me peace. The peace I searched for, I only found in you." Kayamika smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "And I loved you when you had nothing, Ken. That hasn't changed. That will never change." The following months tested them in subtle ways. Friends drifted. Some business partners raised eyebrows. Parties grew tense when whispers slithered through chandeliers and champagne glasses. But Kenneth never wavered. Each time a journalist asked, each time a critic sneered, his response was the same. A steady hand on Kayamika's back, a public reminder that she was not his mistake. She was his choice. Kayamika, in turn, grew into her new role. She wasn't just the janitor who married a billionaire. She began volunteering at hospitals, setting up scholarships for young women in service jobs, and speaking quietly but firmly about dignity, kindness, and second chances. Her humility silenced some critics. Her courage inspired others. Their home became filled with the warmth of family. Kenneth often came back from boardrooms drained, but the sound of Kayamika's laughter in the kitchen, or her quiet singing in the garden, mended what the world tried to break. One night, under the same stars that had once been witnesses to their university dreams, Kenneth surprised her with a small picnic. No cameras, no champagne towers, just suya, puff-puff, and the cool night air. He took her hands in his. "Kayamika," they said, "love like ours wouldn't last. But I don't want just years with you. I want forever." Kayamika's smile was radiant. "Forever has already started, Ken. We're building it, brick by brick, every day." And in that quiet moment, Kenneth realized he had finally won. Not against the tabloids, not against society, but against the loneliness and emptiness that had haunted him for years. He had found his peace, not in gold, not in power, but in the woman who had once loved him when he had nothing. Together, they were building forever. The Obina mansion was unusually quiet that morning. Sunlight streamed through the tall glass windows, spilling golden light across the marble floors. In the garden, where roses climbed in elegant rows and fountains whispered softly, Kayamika stood still, one hand resting lightly on her stomach. Her heart fluttered with both fear and joy. For weeks, she had felt the gentle changes in her body, subtle whispers of a new life within. She hadn't wanted to hope too soon. But now, after the doctor's visit, she knew it was real. She was carrying Kenneth's child. When Kenneth returned later that afternoon, loosening his tie as he stepped into the living room, he immediately noticed her standing by the balcony, a small envelope clutched in her hands. Her eyes shimmered in a way that made his chest tighten. "Amaka," he said softly, walking toward her. "What is it? You look different." She swallowed, her throat dry. "Ken, I have something to tell you." She handed him the envelope with trembling fingers. He opened it, brows knitting as he scanned the words. Then his eyes widened. "Amaka, are you?" His voice cracked, unable to finish. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she nodded. "Yes, Ken, we're going to have a baby." For a heartbeat, the world seemed to stop. Then Kenneth let out a laugh, deep, unrestrained, joyous. He swept her into his arms, spinning her as though they were carefree students again. Not a billionaire and his wife scrutinized by the world. "A baby! Amaka, you've given me the greatest gift of my life." He kissed her forehead again and again, his own eyes wet. That night, however, the outside world did not stay silent. By morning, the tabloids screamed with cruel headlines. Janitor wife secures heir to the Obina fortune. From mop to maternity, Kayamika's final climb. The billionaire's bloodline now in the hands of a housemaid. Kayamika sat on the edge of their bed, phone trembling in her hands as she scrolled through the articles. Her heart sank with every cruel word. "Ken," she whispered when he walked in, "maybe I don't belong here. They'll never accept me. They'll say I trapped you. That I—" "Stop." Kenneth's voice was firm as he took the phone from her hand and tossed it onto the dresser. He knelt in front of her, gently taking her face in his hands. "Listen to me, Amaka. No newspaper, no society gossip, no headline will ever define who you are to me. You are not here because of what they think. You are here because of who you are, the woman who loved me before the world knew my name, the woman who stood by me when I had nothing, and now the woman carrying our child." Her tears spilled freely, but they were no longer from pain. She pressed her forehead to his, her voice breaking. "Ken, I just want our child to grow in love, not in whispers of shame." "And so it shall be," he vowed. His arms wrapped around her, strong and unyielding. "I swear to you, Amaka, no headline will touch our child. I will shield both of you with everything I have." In that moment, as the city outside buzzed with gossip and envy, their hearts found quiet certainty. Between them lay the promise of new life, and with it, the beginning of a new chapter. Not just for their love, but for the legacy they would build together. The boardroom of Obina Group was a cathedral of power. Polished mahogany tables stretching like a river, leather chairs occupied by men and women in tailored suits, and the Lego skyline glittering beyond the glass walls. Kenneth sat at the head of the table, calm yet sharp, his presence commanding the room. But he could feel it, the undercurrent of dissent. Whispers had been growing louder since the news of Kayamika's pregnancy broke. Investors doubted, tabloids mocked, and now the wolves had gathered. The chief financial officer, a man with a thin mustache and eyes like daggers, cleared his throat. "Mr. Obina, with all due respect, your domestic situation is affecting our brand. The media coverage is unfavorable. Our shareholders are nervous. Marrying a janitor was one thing, but now..." He trailed off, letting the insinuation hang in the air. Another director leaned forward. "We must consider optics. Investors are questioning your judgment. The public does not see her as fitting the role." The words stung, but Kenneth's expression remained unreadable. He folded his hands slowly, then rose to his feet. The room fell silent. "Let me remind you," his voice was calm, but it cut through the air like steel. "This empire was not built on your approval. It was built on my sweat, my sacrifices, and my vision. You sit in this room because I allowed you a seat at my table. Do not mistake that for weakness." He walked to the window, looking out at the city he had conquered, then turned back to them. His voice grew sharper. "You speak of optics? Let me speak of truth. Kayamika is not a weakness. She is my strength. She loved me when I had nothing, when I wasn't Kenneth Obina the billionaire, but just a boy with dreams too big for his pocket. If my investors, my board, or even the world cannot respect the woman I love, then let them walk away. I will rebuild everything from dust if I must, but I will not betray her. The silence was suffocating. Suits shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. The CFO opened his mouth, then shut it again, unable to meet Kenneth's blazing stare. At last, Kenneth straightened his tie, his voice calm once more. Meeting adjourned. The directors filed out quietly, defeated. Kenneth remained by the window, breathing deeply, fire still burning in his chest. Moments later, the door opened softly. Kayamika stepped inside. She had overheard enough whispers outside to know what had transpired. Her eyes were worried. "Ken, you didn't have to fight them for me," she said softly, her hand resting over her small but growing belly. "They'll never understand. I don't want to be the reason you lose everything." He turned swiftly, striding to her, and cupped her face in his hands. His eyes softened, though the steel in his voice remained. "Lose everything? Amaka, don't you see? Without you, I am nothing. The money, the power, the boardroom, it means nothing if I don't have you beside me. Let them whisper, let them plot. If they want war, I'll give them war. But they will never, ever touch you." Her lips trembled, tears welling in her eyes. "Ken." He pressed his forehead against hers, his voice breaking into tenderness. "You are my empire, Amaka. The rest of these walls, these towers are just bricks." And in that moment, Kayamika realized his love was not just private. It was shield, sword, and fortress. No boardroom, no billionaire, no power in Lagos could stand against it. The rain that night fell in soft sheets, drumming against the glass walls of the private hospital. The sterile white corridors hummed with quiet urgency, nurses moving quickly with charts and equipment. Inside the labor room, Kayamika clutched Kenneth's hand so tightly her nails dug into his skin. Sweat beaded her forehead, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "Ken," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't think I can do this." Kenneth's heart clenched. He brushed damp strands of hair from her face and kissed her temple. "Yes, you can, Amaka. You are the strongest woman I know. And I'm right here. I won't leave your side, not for a second." The doctor's voice broke through the storm of pain. "She's crowning. One last push, Mrs. Obina. You can do this." Kenneth squeezed her hand, his own eyes stinging. "One more, love. For us. For our baby." Kayamika cried out, her body trembling with effort. And then, suddenly, the air was split by a sound that silenced the entire room. A baby's cry. The doctor lifted the tiny, wriggling form, slick with newness, and smiled. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Obina. It's a boy." Kenneth's legs nearly gave way. He had closed billion-dollar deals, stood before presidents, silenced boardrooms with a glance. But nothing in his life had ever stolen his breath like this moment. When the doctor placed the child in his arms, he looked down at the fragile bundle and felt tears streaming freely down his cheeks. "Amaka." His voice broke as he lowered the baby to her chest. "Look what we made. Look at him." Kayamika wept as she held their son, her hands trembling. "He's perfect, Ken. He's ours." Outside the hospital, chaos raged. Reporters swarmed the gates, camera lights flashing, shouting headlines into microphones. "Obina airborne. Janitor's baby claims billionaire legacy. From mop to motherhood. Kayamika gives birth." Security guards pushed the journalists back as questions flew like arrows. The world wanted to turn this sacred moment into a spectacle. But Kenneth refused. He instructed the hospital staff firmly. "No cameras, no press, no photographs. My son will not be a headline," he said with a fire that silenced even the boldest nurse. "This is family. This is ours." That night, as the rain slowed outside and the world clamored for a glimpse, Kenneth sat quietly in the dim hospital room. Kayamika slept peacefully, exhausted but safe, their newborn son nestled against her chest. Kenneth leaned back in his chair, watching them, a rare softness filling his hardened features. He whispered into the quiet, "You've given me everything, Amaka. Money never filled me. Power never held me. But this family, this is my empire." For the first time in his life, Kenneth Obinna felt whole. The Obinna mansion was no longer silent. Years had passed, and the once echoing halls were now filled with the patter of small feet and the music of laughter. Kenneth and Kayamika's son had grown into a lively boy with his father's sharp eyes and his mother's smile, and now he had a younger sister who followed him everywhere like a shadow. From the veranda, Kenneth and Kayamika often sat in wicker chairs, hand in hand, watching their children play tag across the manicured lawns. Kenneth, once a man hardened by ambition, found himself laughing at the smallest things. His daughter's clumsy dance, his son's attempts to build castles from mud. It was in these simple moments that he realized what true wealth meant. The world outside had changed too. Where once tabloids had mocked, now their story had softened into legend. Newspapers began to call it the love that defied Lagos high society. What was once scandal had become an inspiration. At a charity gala one evening, Kayamika was approached by a shy young woman in a plain dress. Her hands shook as she held out a small envelope. "Madam," she whispered, "because of your scholarship, I was able to finish school. People used to mock me because I cleaned offices to survive. But when I read your story, I believed I could still rise. You gave me hope." Tears welled in Kayamika's eyes as she embraced her. She hadn't just become Kenneth's wife. She had become a symbol to countless women who once felt invisible. Later that night, back at the mansion, Kenneth pulled her into the garden where the stars shone bright above. He held her close, his voice low with emotion. "Amaka, look what we've built. Not just a family, not just a home, but a legacy. Do you see it? The world will remember us. Not for my wealth, not for these buildings, but for this love. For us." Kayamika rested her head on his chest, her heart swelling. "And the most beautiful part, Ken, is that none of this was planned. It was simply love finding its way back." Their children ran to them then, giggling and pulling at their hands, demanding to be lifted high into the night air. Kenneth obliged, throwing his son onto his shoulders, while Kayamika carried their daughter, who wrapped tiny arms around her neck. Together, they stood under the stars, the billionaire, the janitor who became his wife, and the children who carried their legacy. And in that moment, it was clear. Theirs was not just a marriage. It was a story that had outlasted gossip, silenced scorn, and turned whispers of shame into echoes of hope. A love that would live long after tabloids faded. A legacy of love. 20 years had passed since the day Kenneth and Kayamika said their vows. The Obinna mansion, though aged by time, still stood tall, a blend of modern elegance and timeless grace. Its walls carried the laughter of children who had grown into young adults, the echoes of family dinners, and the quiet prayers whispered in nights of both joy and trial. Kenneth sat in his study, silver strands now mixing with the black of his hair, his once fiery eyes softened by wisdom. Across the desk sat his son, no longer a boy but a confident young man in a crisp suit, ready to take on the mantle of leadership in the family businesses. "You don't have to be me," Kenneth said quietly. "Be better. Lead with heart, not just with mind. That's what your mother taught me." Outside in the garden, Kayamika watched their daughter prepare for her graduation ceremony. The young woman had inherited her mother's resilience and her father's daring. She wanted to study law not for prestige but to fight for women who had no voice. When the family later gathered for the celebration, Kenneth gave a speech, his voice thick with emotion. "Years ago, I thought wealth was measured in towers of glass and gold. But one woman showed me that real wealth is in love, in family, in building others up when the world tries to tear them down. Tonight, as I look at our children, I know we've built something greater than empire, we've built a legacy." The crowd applauded, but the truest applause was in the glistening eyes of Kayamika, who stood beside him, still his anchor, still his miracle. Far beyond Lagos, their love story had become part of cultural memory. Students wrote essays about it. Newspapers referenced it when speaking of resilience. Women in rural towns told their daughters about the janitor who became the queen of a billionaire's heart. And so, their names were no longer just Kenneth and Kayamika Obina. They had become something bigger, symbols of love that defied power, wealth, and the judgment of society. As the evening sky turned violet, Kenneth and Kayamika slipped away from the crowd, finding their favorite spot beneath the old almond tree in the garden. Hand in hand, they looked up at the stars, just as they had done so many years ago. "Do you think they'll remember us?" Kayamika whispered. Kenneth kissed her forehead. "They don't have to, Amaka. Our love already wrote history." And in the quiet of the night, wrapped in the laughter of their grown children and the whispers of the world they had changed, their story closed not with an ending, but with a promise that true love, once found, never dies.